Hello there, friends. I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, and I am here today with
Chris Shumate.
And we are going to have a Coffee Convo. Coffee Convos is an opportunity to sit down with some friends and get to know the story of God's work in their lives. And so today, Chris Shumate, you qualify as a friend. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's start off with that. Tell us who you are, how you got to this point, and why you love the Bean Barn.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, so that sort of hints at part of it. I grew up here, grew up in Greenville.
There are some folks who are listening who are going, what is the Bean Barn?
Yes. A lot of folks will know that, though.
Yes.
So my family moved here when I was not quite 3 years old, about
Okay.
2.5. We moved here from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was born. My dad was on staff at a church there.
Okay.
And then we moved here for him to take a role on staff at Towering Oaks Baptist Church here in Greenville.
Yep.
So
Until like
last
a year ago.
Yeah, last year. Yeah,
Cool.
so that's
Cool.
That's a huge part of my story.
Yeah.
And not only Greenville being my hometown, but Towering Oaks being home church.
Sure.
From again time I was 2.5 until I moved out and got married. That was home. And
Yeah.
so grew up not only going to church there, but going to the Christian school there
Uh-huh.
as well. So
Okay.
6 days a week we were we were at Towering Oaks.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
so it's really hard to sort of quantify the influence that had because it was just huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've got a younger brother who's 3 years younger than me, and he was born here.
Mm-hmm.
And we both graduated from Greenville High.
Cool.
My wife went to Greenville High as well, Michelle. We
Oh.
graduated in the same class, 2002.
Cool.
We just had our 20th reunion.
Doesn't it sound weird to say big numbers like that?
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
I am past my 30th and coming up on 35th soon.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why this is here. Actually, First Christian Church of Greene County is why.
That's
it's here.
why. Yeah.
So, you and your wife knew each other.
Sort of. Kind of,
Okay.
sort of.
All right.
So we were in the same class. We had classes together at Greenville High, but I don't think we ever said a word to each other. We just sort of ran in different circles.
Yeah.
Like, I played basketball, and she was a majorette, and she hung out with the band people, and I didn't hang out with the band people.
Okay.
She was in chorus. I took chorus for like 1 year because they were going on a cruise.
So
And
she
I thought,
was-
that sounds good.
She was into the arts.
She was, yes, very talented in that way. So even though we knew of each other, we didn't really meet until we were both in college and got involved with the same college ministry
Okay.
at church.
Cool.
So that's when we got to know each other. And at the time, I was a student at ETSU.
Mm-hmm.
She was a student at UT.
Okay.
And so we were both here on the weekends a lot, hanging out with each other, involved in church stuff here.
Yeah.
And so around that time is when I really felt confirmation that I wanted to marry her and I wanted to do ministry. So that was something that the Lord sort of led me into during those last couple years of college.
Cool.
And so
And here you are now with how many children?
we got 3 children.
Yes.
Our daughter Avery is 11.
Cool.
Our son Nolan is 8. And then our son Hayden is 5.
You're getting to the point clearly where you have to like think about the ages.
Well,
and-
I know I'm on camera, and I would never live it down if I got that wrong. So yeah, just trying to get it straight. But yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Michelle homeschools them.
Cool.
So she's with them a lot more than I am right
As we
now.
speak.
But yeah, she's with them now.
Right now.
Hopefully they're doing school. I don't know.
Kids, get to the math. Come on.
Yeah. So when I graduated from ETSU, I spent about a year working at Towering Oaks as
Oh, okay.
worship leader and groundskeeper / janitor / painter.
Yeah, a lot of
/
things. Yeah.
Did that for about a year to
Cool.
save money to get married and start seminary.
Cool.
So we
I
did
didn't
that.
know that piece. Okay. Cool.
Yep. And then went to seminary at Southeastern
Mhm.
in North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh.
Yep.
Served part-time on staff at a church in Durham, North Carolina while we
Okay.
were there. And then our daughter was born there. After seminary, we moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I worked on staff at a church there for right at 5 years, just a couple months short of 5 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where our older son was born. And then in 2016, we moved to Elizabethton. Wanted to get back to East Tennessee for a few different reasons. And
Yeah.
so I pastored Oak Street Baptist Church in Elizabethton from 2016 to this past summer.
Six.
I think it was 6 years and 1 week.
Okay.
Was what I made it there. And then our youngest, Hayden, was born in Johnson City. So
Yeah.
So
Cool.
we kind of say, like, if we don't move again, we won't have any more kids. Because they've all been born in different states.
Oh, yeah?
So Raleigh,
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa, and Johnson City. But
So you are what's the official title? You're the chaplain, university chaplain.
the official title is campus minister.
campus minister at Tusculum University.
Yes.
Okay.
But people don't really know what to call me sometimes. Chaplain, pastor, minister. Hey, you.
Reverend Shumate.
Yeah,
Chris.
that's one of the things, like, in the official programs for, like, graduation and stuff, it'll say the Reverend Doctor.
The Reverend Dr. Christopher Shumate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not my style, but
You're not the most holy Reverend Doctor.
probably not.
You are the most lettered person in this room currently. So.
Well,
All right.
yes,
moving
I'm
on.
glad. I don't know.
So let's do some get to know you speed questions, and then let's get into university chaplain
Yeah.
questions and Tusculum soon. Traditional curly or waffle fries, and from where?
Traditional,
Okay.
but I prefer they have some seasoning salt on them. So somewhere like Pal's or something that has some
Okay,
flavor to it.
gotcha. Sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sometimes the pals have a little bit too much of that for me.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like a light seasoning pals
Yeah.
guy. Okay, cool. Just as long as it's not curly, because those are of the devil.
I mean, I like the taste of them, but they always get, like, so big and the inside's not cooked all the way.
Yeah.
It's just.
I'm with you. I like mine a little crunchier.
Right.
And yeah. Which means probably I like a lot of grease.
There you go.
That's a part of my fries.
That goes back to the bean barn.
Well,
That's yeah.
Well.
So that was huge. Yeah.
Well,
I love
well,
the greasy food there.
okay, so
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the.
no.
questions, yeah.
I'm going with the flow, man. You like the bean barn because you grew up in Greenville,
Yes.
but apparently it's an important part of your high school years.
Yeah. So when I was at Greenville High, we got to go off campus for lunch.
Yeah.
At least everybody but freshmen did. Well, freshmen weren't supposed to go off campus for lunch. So.
Everybody but freshmen?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a mad dash to make it to a restaurant
Kids
and then
these
get
days,
back
man, they've
in
got so
time for
tough.
class. And
But you
so
only
we-
had like,
Yeah, like 30 minutes or something. I don't know. It was not much time. So we were at the Bean Barn most days, me and my group of buddies, and we were there enough that they sort of got to know what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so
so it was the
somebody
Chris Shumate-
somebody would kind of either ask to go to the bathroom during, like, second period, or they'd work in the guidance office, and they'd call ahead of time and say, "Hey, we're coming to lunch today," and they'd have it ready for us. And
That's awesome.
yeah, Jerry and Donna took good care of us
That's
over
cool.
there. Yeah.
So what was the Chris Shumate special?
I usually got a Hobart
Yeah, you did. Of
or
course.
beans all the way
Okay. Yeah.
and cheesecake.
I've never had cheesecake. Back
At-
the
at all?
Old day bean barn.
Oh, okay.
No, I've had cheesecake. Yeah.
Yeah.
At all.
That was really,
What is cheesecake?
Yeah.
I like the Hobart, but I'm not a cheese on burgers dude.
So cheese and cake. Yes, cheese on burgers. No.
Cheese on cake, but if it's like the New York style sort of, I don't know, like real cheesecake.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to
To
be.
each their own.
Okay, now that we've covered that.
Yeah.
What is something you are really good at, or you know a lot about, that might surprise people?
I'm not
Or like a
sure I'm
narrow
good
thing
at
you
much,
like,
or I know,
or know know a lot about that people would
I
find
don't
obscure.
know that I actually know a lot about this, but I should, because I minored in Appalachian Studies.
Really?
So that's sort of a narrow focus thing. Like,
Yeah, it is.
when I was majoring in sociology, they told me I needed a minor, and so I was like, that sounds fun.
That's sort of like saying, I grew up speaking English, so
Yeah.
I think I'll go with English.
Yeah.
I grew up in Appalachia.
But it was
so,
really fun, like the history of Appalachia,
Sure.
culture of Appalachia.
That's
We
cool.
took classes like the history of folk music,
Yeah.
and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was really cool.
Can you do that saw
No, I can't do that. No, that would be cool.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually been to a saw harp, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Concert.
I
remember it as a kid.
multiple people doing it.
No,
or-
just one.
Okay,
Just one. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
remember it
think
as a
I saw a
kid.
comedian do that one time, like as part of his
his
act.
act.
He would do certain songs.
That's cool. So, okay, I know who to come to for my Appalachian history questions.
There you go.
What is something that's recently made you mad, sad, and glad?
Mad.
We're getting in deep now.
Yeah. Mad. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit.
The fries question.
When my fries aren't cooked right,
That's
makes me mad.
oh,
It's easier to think of the other two, so I'll start there, I guess.
sure.
Glad. I've really started to develop some relationships with a few students at Tusculum, and that's been a real encouragement for me.
Yeah.
They're starting to drop in and say hi in my office and hang out between classes. And,
Cool.
And that, I just really enjoy that, and I think
Yeah,
it's
that's big.
encouraging.
Yeah.
That God's leading me to those kind of students, so I'm glad about that.
Yeah, that's half of your battle in a lot of ways. Is
Right.
just developing relationships with students
Yeah.
and faculty. Yeah. Cool. Where is your office?
My office is in the top floor of the Niswonger Commons
Okay.
building, so that's the building where the arena is and Chick-fil-A and the cafeteria.
Yeah. So students are in and out.
Right. Yeah, and I think
all
that
day.
was the intention, is that I would be in a sort of central location where there's a lot of foot traffic and
Yeah.
in the middle of all the action, so to speak. So yeah, it's working out well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So that's glad.
You don't have to answer mad or sad.
Well,
we go with what you give us
I
on
kinda,
Coffee Convos.
Yeah. Something does come to mind that's made me sad recently, because I was just thinking about it the other day.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how many of the Christian artists and bands and things like that I used to listen to have now left the faith.
deconstructed.
Yes, exactly.
Entirely.
I mean, it's pretty
or
amazing.
evangelicals.
Yeah, you think
Yeah.
about not only like the more mainstream, popular like CCM acts, but sort of the hardcore like underground rock bands, like across the spectrum. There's a whole lot of them that are very, at very different places than they used to be, and that's sad for me because growing up as a youth group kid in the late '90s, like that was a huge part of my
Oh, absolutely.
church
It's a huge
culture
part of
and
mine.
yeah.
My mom worked for a Christian publishing company that
Okay.
got me a 35% discount on all my tapes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I was one of the main, well, this is going to date me a bit, one of the main goobers in our youth group that had 2 or 3 of those big carry cases.
Oh, yeah.
So I literally had some carry cases of cassette tapes. So I'd show up to, I'm giving the current people on staff and at First Christian fodder to mock me, of course, but I had hundreds of tapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my thing.
I had tapes, but I was more in CDs.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had
I
all
know.
all the big.
I clearly predate
cases.
you a bit.
That's okay.
By a decade.
But yeah, I mean that was a huge part of just
Yeah.
my culture and just my world, was that sort of Christian music.
I have had moments of being legit sad about some of that as it's happened over the last number of years with certain folks who were musicians or artists, and then also preachers I
Oh yeah.
grew up listening to and have seen as sort of
Yeah.
mentors or people I liked a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I was thinking about that too. Don't need to mention names, I don't guess, but I remember when I was in seminary,
Uh-huh.
they'd have guest preachers come and speak in chapel, and
Yeah.
depending on who it was, there'd be a really big crowd
Oh, yeah.
or a smaller crowd.
Sure.
And I specifically remember 3 of like the biggest name guys who drew the biggest crowds.
Uh-huh.
All 3 of them have since had major issues.
Yeah.
And that was also just a huge part of my development.
Sure.
Theologically and just ministry philosophy and all that. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's made me sad lately.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, any other favorite memories of growing up in Greenville?
Yeah, I mean, a ton. I mean, I just had so many good friends here and such a community in my church and elsewhere. Like, I just knew people loved me, and I knew they cared about me, and I knew there were a lot of people I could go to if I needed something.
So you grew up with a very clear sense of rootedness in the community.
Definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Super cool.
And the church was a huge part of that,
Absolutely.
and that's why.
Because if that had not been there, the rootedness with the community at large would not be what you're talking about as much
Exactly.
right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that sort of led me to want to, minister in the local church
Mm-hmm.
and give of my time
Mm-hmm.
to the church body. And
Yeah.
I also think it's part of what is motivating me now to help churches get involved at Tusculum.
Mm. Yeah.
Because I want others to have that sort of community and relational connection.
And it's so important at that age
Yeah.
for those students to have a sense of that. So what does that look like in your role as campus minister, and what kinds of things do you see already happening that you want to build on, want to continue to develop new things in those ways for not just town, gown, in generic terms kind of relations, but the faith community, churches in Greenville, Greene County, and Tusculum University.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I try to tell people frequently that as good as it is to do campus ministry as a campus minister,
Yeah.
I really want churches to be driving the ministry on campus, because students need a church. They don't just need a campus ministry.
Right.
And so I want them to develop those relationships with people who are outside their typical peer group,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can observe what it's like to follow Jesus in other stages and seasons of life.
Yes.
I think they need that.
With the body at large,
Right.
because you're not going to get that in your little slice of,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some benefits to being in your own little slice of life to just study. Sure.
There is.
Yeah.
So I want to facilitate opportunities for churches to come to campus and interact with students and develop relationships with students, in hopes that will, lead to the students being acclimated into the churches.
Yeah. So
And
what does that
so-
look like practically?
Yeah. Well, we have a few churches that are actively involved on campus in terms of having, small group fellowship Bible studies on campus,
Mhm.
hosting worship services on campus.
Mm-hmm.
You all helped with a worship night at the beginning of the semester this fall, where we just had out in the yard by the library just a night of great worship music and fellowship, and that was really neat to see how well that went. And then beyond that,
Especially the preaching I heard that night was really like.
oh, I
phenomenal.
did that. Yeah,
You're like,
who did
was
that?
the oh,
Yeah.
that wasn't me. Those of you who are wondering, it was Chris.
Yeah. So I don't know about that, but and then we have a team adoption program
Yes.
that Dr. Hummel started, I guess, last year.
I think it was last year. Sounds right.
I think so. I think this is the second year we've done that. So local
Yeah.
churches adopt our athletic teams
Mhm.
to provide support for them.
Mhm.
Not only that, they come to the games and cheer for those student athletes and coaches, but a lot of them are really meeting practical needs, helping with pregame meals or
Uh-huh.
even, some of the, supplies and things that they might need, and hosting events at the church or movie nights or cookouts or whatever, just to try to build those relationships and show them we care about you. We don't just want you coming to church on Sunday. We want to be a part of your life, and we
Right.
want to get to know you and
Yeah.
support you and what you're doing here at Tusculum. And that's been really neat, because, there's a big difference in saying we want you to come to us and saying we care about you enough that we're going to come there and we're going to show interest in what matters to you.
Yeah.
So that's been really neat to see as well.
When a church says, "Hey, yeah, we want to adopt this team,"
Mm-hmm.
What's the sort of understanding and the expectations? it sort of works how you want to make it work. Just make sure you're supporting them in this kind of way, and you're developing relationships in these kinds of ways. Right. What kind of leeway do churches have for that?
Yeah, it looks very different depending on each church and each team, right. Because churches are very different. They've got different people and different gifts and different resources.
And if you say, hey, we'll take the football team, you've just said, a lot of people.
Right, that's right.
As opposed to, I don't know, the bowling team or something like that.
So it does look a lot different. Is
there bowling at Tusculum?
There is.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
okay.
there is.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, bowling. I didn't mean to contrast you with the football team as the little team, but
yeah. So
okay.
I try to encourage the church leaders to communicate with the coaching staff,
right,
to try to figure out what would be most helpful for them and what would be most meaningful for them,
right?
Because that really does vary quite a bit. And then the timing of that as well. Sometimes it's like if it's a spring sport, sometimes it's a lot better to really develop that relationship in the fall. When they have more time, so that they can.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have some more relationship building time off season. In season, it's probably a little more like, hey, rah, good job.
Yeah, that's right.
Showing up to their things a little bit.
I try to just facilitate those relationships and be a resource to help if I can, but we don't really dictate it has to look this way or that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't hand a church a brochure and say, hey, make sure you got these 3 or 4 things. It's hey, let's talk to this coach.
Whatever. Right. Now, having said that, there are some churches that have done really, really well. And we want to sort of highlight that as here's some things to consider.
Right.
Here's something you might want to think about, or some things that have worked well for them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that either.
Yeah.
We just want it to be a meaningful connection. We really want it to be a blessing for both the team and the church, so that it's mutual.
Yeah.
Not just like we got to do this because we said we would, or that church is coming again. Great.
Yeah, right. No, that's cool. That's
so those are some of the sort of big things we're trying to emphasize and facilitate right now.
Yeah.
And then I've told others, feel free to let me know if you have ideas or suggestions, or if there are things that you want to see happen on campus.
Yeah.
We're open to those sorts of opportunities. So we don't want to try to squeeze anybody into a certain mold, but as the Lord leads you and as you feel, directed toward one opportunity or another, we just want to help make that happen.
Yeah. Super cool. What does a day in the life of Dr. Chris Shumate at Tusculum University look like as campus minister?
Yeah. It depends a little bit.
I'm sure.
Kind of like in pastoral ministry, no 2 days are exactly the same.
Yeah.
But I try to get around to various offices to just say hello to people and let them know I'm here. If I can pray for them about anything, if I can help in any way.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm in the office some so the students can come in and hang out. I've taught an orientation class this semester.
Okay.
And next semester I'll be teaching a Bible class, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
So there's obviously, preparation and grading and things like that involved there.
What class is that?
In the spring?
Yeah.
It's Hebrew and Christian traditions.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sure.
So it's sort of a whole Bible overview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that'll be challenging but fun.
Is that a required class?
It is one of 3 that are required.
Okay.
So everybody needs to take either Intro to Old Testament, Intro to New Testament, or Hebrew and Christian traditions.
Okay.
And then there are other Bible classes and religion classes that you take if you're gonna minor in religion or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's something I'm still figuring out. I love to teach, and have done a lot of that in a church setting, but that's very different than a university classroom. So I'm excited about the challenge of teaching that class and teaching the Bible, not necessarily to church people who want to be there and who want to learn the Bible, but to college students who have to take the class and might not have very much interest or background in the Bible. Yeah. So I'm excited about that opportunity.
A very interesting, different dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, from question to question or
person
to person. Yeah. Not just like, the class, but
Yeah.
as different as
Yeah.
moment by moment. Yeah.
And then so beyond that, reaching out to churches, trying to work with them and build those partnerships and relationships with them.
Right.
And then we have chapel once a week. So
that's your baby.
I speak probably most weeks at this point.
Well,
but we have others that
at least planning it and
yes. So if I'm not the one speaking or leading chapel that week,
Right.
I'm at least inviting others to participate.
People to,
Yes. So we do that on Monday afternoons, and so
Mhm.
I spend a good bit of time each week with that, and then I just try to hang out. I'll go down to the Pioneer Perk and play pool with some students, or speak to them in the cafeteria.
So really, what you do is you're just playing ping pong all day.
That's it.
Is what you're doing.
And I don't have a very good record. I thought I was a decent ping pong player, but
Oh, really?
I've not won very many games down there, so I don't know.
Little did you know that the average Tusculum student,
Yeah,
um,
where I'm just past my prime now.
how often throughout most weeks are you showing up at something for which you need to put on the jacket and be the pastoral chaplain-y face for something, I don't mean in like superficial terms. I just mean to participate in something like that.
Not every week.
Okay.
It sort of comes in spurts depending on what's happening in kind of the life of the campus.
Sure.
So last week
That's true.
was homecoming.
Yes.
So there were several different events and alumni gatherings and things like that where
makes
I
sense,
was
yes.
involved.
Mhm.
One of the really neat things that they do every year, and this was obviously my first time to participate, is the week of homecoming. They have a memorial service for all of the alumni who have passed away during the last year.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
I got to participate in that and speak and pray with that group as they remembered their peers and classmates, and so that was a neat thing.
Yeah. Cool.
And it was during homecoming we had a pastor's breakfast and different things like that. So it like beginning of the semester, orientation week.
Sure.
That's a lot of those events. Homecoming's a lot of those events, but
I bet it is.
not every week.
Yeah. Goes in spurts.
Yeah.
So what have been some of the differences with church ministry, chaplain, university, campus pastor, minister kind of things? What are some of the transitions and differences and things that are similar, different than you expected, what you expected, etc.? Yeah. All those kinds of comparisons and contrasts, etc.
I'm not sure I knew totally what to expect.
I bet.
And I'm still learning that in a lot of ways. So I started in July.
Uh-huh.
So 4 months or so. I can't. Yeah.
And students weren't
Right. There weren't
on campus much then.
Right.
Sure.
There were some who were there for football or whatever, but they were in practice or class or meetings, and you didn't see them around a whole lot. So it's only been a couple months that I've really been with students on campus a lot. But maybe to back up a little bit, the reason I was interested in the position.
Yeah, that's a good question. What was the reason you were interested in this position?
A few different reasons, I guess, but I had been feeling for some time a burden that I was, and this sounds bad, but you'll know what I mean. I was with Christians all the time, right? Like when you pastor a church, that's really
and here we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you spend all your time planning church events or being with church people, and and I felt, and I'm not saying this for anybody else, but from myself, I felt a burden. I needed to be around more people who weren't Christians, and try to love them and serve them and invest in them and minister to them in a way that I was not really able to in that pastoral ministry.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it, and then I've always really appreciated the opportunities to invest in young people, whether that's in the church or outside of the church, and they're at such a pivotal time in their lives, making those decisions that set the course for decades to come.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity to invest in them and influence them on the campus of the university, that's such a unique opportunity.
Sure.
That was a real draw as well.
Yeah.
And I knew that with that would come challenges and
Sure.
difficulties, because it's one thing to try to minister to people who have hired you to be their pastor, and they want to be there each week, and they want you to.
Theoretically, they want to be there.
It's another thing when you've got students that came to study or to play a sport, and
Right.
they don't have any particular interest in that,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not just gonna show up, to hear what you have to say. They're not gonna necessarily seek you out.
Yeah.
But how do you still love them and serve them and help them and do whatever you can to be a helpful presence on that campus? Like it's just a very different
Yeah.
setting.
Oh, yeah. What have been some of the challenges so far that you can see or foresee in that have been different in this newer context?
Well, I think I'm still new enough into it that I don't know a full answer to that yet, but a lot of what I'm still doing is just starting to learn the culture
Mhm.
of the campus community.
Right.
What are the priorities that people have? What are the rhythms that seem to matter?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that people really care about? And how can I, meaningfully participate in that
Mm-hmm.
in a way that helps me do what I'm trying to do?
Yeah.
And so just, contextualization, learning my new context in my environment,
Yeah.
having those discussions with, faculty and staff that have been there a lot longer than me.
Right.
Like you tell me sort of what you see here,
Right.
what some of the challenges are that you see. How can I help meet some of the needs that are here?
Yeah.
And really just listening more.
Right. An open-handed posture to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
soak it in. And
Right.
yeah.
So that's been a huge part of what I've been trying to do, is just listen and learn and get my bearings a bit, because in any situation I don't know it all, but especially in this that's so new and different from what I'm used to.
Right.
There's a lot that I can learn from others.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the questions that students in universities and colleges at that age nowadays are asking, needing to know about? What are things that they're challenged with? Because, as you say, like, I spend some time with people that age,
Mhm.
no question. Actually, a decent amount. The most of them already think ish like I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some things you're seeing,
I think.
or that are needs of people, students that age?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've noticed is that whereas in the past maybe you would think of some of those apologetic type questions like, is there any proof that God exists? Or, is there
Right.
evidence for the resurrection?
Like in
Or-
traditional empirical truth terms.
Right, yes. And it's not that those questions don't matter anymore,
Yes.
but it's like those questions aren't even on the radar of a lot of students. It's like it's so far from their concern, like, why would I even ask that question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And so
If they
I don't
do,
think-
would it be like, not is the Bible true or right, but it might be like, well, granted, they wouldn't even, like, that's not even necessarily on the
Yeah.
radar, but it might be, is it
why should I care?
is it morally good, and
Yeah.
why should I care about it, maybe,
Yeah.
as you say?
Yeah, I think there are a lot who, why should I care? Why should I be interested in this? What does it matter?
What does it matter? Okay.
Um,
yeah.
I heard somebody say, or maybe I read it in an article not long ago, I can't remember, but somebody said that nowadays apologetics is basically like the book of Ecclesiastes. And I think that's a helpful way to think about it. Like vanity, all is
Yeah,
vanity.
yeah.
Where do we find meaning? What truly matters?
Yeah.
What's life under the sun about? So I think that sort of approach is going to be the starting point, really. Like, and so in terms of what they need,
Uh-huh.
I don't think it starts with answers to those kind of questions. I think it starts with somebody that shows they love them and that they care about them and what they're going through, and they're interested in getting to know them as a person, and they're interested not just in talking to them about what they believe, but hearing from them about who they are and what they believe. And I think, again, that's a huge part of why I want local churches to be involved and build those relationships, is so that students can get to know some Christians that actually care about them and want to serve them.
Yeah, I've noticed so many Christians in contexts like that talk at, speak to, and yes, of course, there is a truth to the gospel, but that's not even close to what anybody wants to hear or care about. And we live in a world where, like, we can sort of materially control our ability to be in that kind of a setting where we're getting talked to or not, like that. So how about you? Questions about you.
Yeah.
Tell me about you. I'm interested in you.
Yeah.
If that kind of thing is not the beachhead, forget the rest.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely just out of hand, forget it.
I think it was Francis Schaeffer that talked about love as the final apologetic. So you can have all the arguments, you can, quote all the philosophers or whoever, but if you don't love people, they're not going to want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I still think that's very true today.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a big part of, again, why I'm just trying to build relationships and show concern and care, and trust that will open up opportunities for some of those discussions later on.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't mean you shy away. Like, you don't have to be ashamed or afraid to speak the truth.
Right.
But it's just the way in which you approach those interactions and conversations.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, what would you say are the greatest 2 or 3 needs of students at Tusculum University that you can see so far? I don't just mean, like, spiritual needs, though that could be included, of course, but from what you're seeing so far. Yeah.
It sounds really basic, but they really need adults to care for them and love them and help them.
Why do you say adults?
Well, I think they know their peers care about them. Like, they have their own friend groups or teammates or whoever that they know they can go to and they know they can talk with. But I think it makes a big difference if it's a professor or a community leader or somebody else that can speak to them from a different perspective or with a little more objectivity, maybe, who's not in it as much.
Is that partly because so many are coming from, increasingly over the last number of decades in our country and the world, more and more students are coming from broken homes where there may not have been 2 parents, or divorce is the typical situation for many of them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's part of it, but I also think the last few years have just been really difficult for everybody. But you think about students that are freshmen in college right now.
Yes.
Their junior and senior years of high school were totally turned upside down with online school and canceled sports seasons and so much of what we think of as like a typical high school experience they didn't have.
Right.
And it's affected the way that they're now entering college in terms of, social settings. Kind of, they're used to being alone more, and they're used to being online more and not as much in person.
Yeah.
But it's also affected, I think, just the understanding of academic expectations. Like, if you were having to do stuff online and you didn't have a whole lot of accountability or face-to-face instruction.
Sure.
Now all of a sudden, when you're in a university classroom, that's a very different environment, and I think they sometimes have trouble adjusting to that, and mental health is a huge issue now across the board. But
sure is.
On our campus and other campuses, that's a huge concern.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging in the sense that there are a lot of students that are open about that. Like they're willing to say, I'm struggling. But it's a challenge too. And so how do we again provide support, help, assistance to them that is from an adult that cares for them and wants what's best for them, and maybe has some insight or resources to help them.
Yeah, I was thinking along those lines a little bit. You said what we would think of as an experience growing up through high school or college as a normative experience. For many of the kids who went through 2 years of COVID, 2 years was like 10 to 20% of their lives.
Yeah. And again, those are such formative years.
For sure.
You think about where you're at as a 17, 18-year-old and all the things that you experience and how that shapes who you're becoming. That has a big impact.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I picked up on the adults thing, which may not have been your intent, but what were some people for you growing up, or still, who are people who are adults or mentors or people you looked up to, and it can be people you were in contact with from day to day, or actually knew, or people you read, or whatever. Yeah, what are some people who have been some mentors for you?
My parents, first of all.
Yeah.
Just really, really grateful for the example they set and the way that they led me and my brother in terms of Christian commitment and church involvement, and
faithfulness is a big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal when you're a kid and your parents are that way.
Yeah, so that, looking back on that was a huge blessing, and even now, just seeing them, still faithful to the Lord and faithful to each other, and all that's a huge influence. Yeah. And then
good job, Shumates.
Yeah. Church leaders, I mentioned how important that was. So some of the men that taught my high school boys Sunday school class, like putting up with our craziness and our questions, and just the random nature of what it's like dealing with 15, 16-year-old boys. Like,
yes, indeed.
They did that week to week, and they still managed to love us and teach us something.
Yes, and not throat punch you.
Yeah. I'm sure they wanted to. No doubt. And even like taking us on trips, like traveling with a herd of teenagers. Like, that's not easy. So
yes.
I think back to a lot of those leaders. And then as I started to get involved in ministry more myself during those last few years of college, my dad was a huge, resource and mentor in that, because he was obviously serving in that way and had been for a long time. Yeah. The guy that was my youth pastor for a few years, 2D Wright, I don't know if you know him or not, but still around here, still a great friend and mentor. I'll still reach out to him if I need some advice on something. And
cool.
He was a big help for me during those years when I was kind of just trying to figure some things out.
Cool.
And then both in North Carolina and in Alabama, when I was serving on staff at those churches, I was really blessed to be working with some very faithful, godly men in those churches who modeled, good leadership, and faithful preaching, and a love for their family, and so just being able to get sort of an up close view of what that was like for them was a huge help for me.
What are some of the most helpful leadership, and not just in ministry, but life, leadership, family, business, whatever. What are some of the most important things you would say you've learned in terms of leadership lessons that you've seen, had modeled, or on your own had to learn by trial and error, etc.?
Yeah, definitely some of that. Well, I think both from seeing positive examples of this and negative examples, humility is just key. You know?
Yeah.
And you think back to even just the words of Jesus and the example of Jesus, like, don't lord it over them, right? Be humble. And that means you got to be willing to listen to others and receive correction and criticism and be willing to admit when you're wrong and all that. Like, none of that's easy.
Right.
But a good leader does that because it's not about them, right? It's about the mission.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge.
Can you think of a time or a person or situation that showed you that servant leadership or humility that comes to mind for you?
Yeah.
It may be a name, and maybe a situation, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think about the church I served at in Tuscaloosa.
Okay.
There was an issue where for months, if not years, the pastor had sort of been leading in a certain direction toward a certain change that needed to take place.
Okay.
And he was convinced, and staff was convinced, like, this is the right thing, this is what we need to do. And
Right.
and I still think it was the right thing, but there were some who were able to say, we agree, but this is not the right time. Yeah. And so he had the humility to say, okay, let's hold off. And it was a really big deal at the time, because he'd put it out there.
Right.
But at the time, I sort of was like, oh, come on, like, just do it, you know? But looking back, I see now he was more concerned about kind of the big picture. And
of the actual long-term health of all involved.
Right. And keeping, his relationships and his credibility intact so that he could continue to lead them, not just use all his leadership chips right here. And so that was a real act of humility to me, because it showed that he was willing to listen and receive that feedback from others. So that was really helpful for me to see.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And that goes to another thing I think is really important as well. A leader needs to know his or her people well enough and care about them enough to know what's realistic and what's not. What can I reasonably expect from these people, and what can I not? And
because it can go all directions. You
Right.
can expect more than is reasonable.
Right.
And there can be situations where you're expecting more than they know is possible. Right? Like, so it can go all directions.
Yeah.
In those kinds of ways, if those were the terms. Yeah.
So I think that's important too. You don't want to be coasting when you should be pushing the gas.
Right.
But you don't want to be
pushing the gas off the cliff.
Yeah. Somebody said to me years ago, like, if you're one step ahead, you're leading. If you're 20 steps ahead, you're a martyr, right? Like, you're
a target.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's important to know. Yeah.
But it may not be for the best reasons.
Yeah. So I think that's important. I think patience is really important too.
Okay. Meaning long-term thinking.
Well,
patience with change.
Yeah. People don't
Patience
change
with
overnight. Culture doesn't change overnight.
Right, and I don't just mean like institutional change, but like people change.
Right. Yeah. It takes time. It takes prayer. It takes, relational investment, discussion, collaboration. It takes a lot of that. And so sometimes I worry that, and I know this was true of me at times, just in general, I worry sometimes that we get so caught in the vision of what we think should be that we don't really care for what is. Does that make sense? I think it was Jonathan Lehman, I think, was the one who said, don't be more in love with like the ideal version of church you have in your head than you are with
the church that's actually there.
Church that you actually have.
Right.
Like, you need to love them and care for them and lead them where they're at.
Yeah.
Not just be so busy trying to get them where you think they need to be that you're not really doing
Yeah,
a
I've
good
thought
job.
about that a lot as we go to 3 campuses, and it's easy for people to get an institutional growth sort of thinking about what the vision is, as if the as if the goal is to get to a certain size of campus or
Yeah.
a certain number of programs working right, and we talk a lot in our weekly meetings, like, okay, who on your team have you encouraged? What's a
Yeah.
win you're seeing in the growth of your people? How are you communicating with your team or your leaders or new folks? And I've got this big long rant on our weekly staff meeting thing that is all about this issue of whatever happens in terms of the institutional, organizational vision things. That is all actually just meant to serve the people growth.
Yeah.
And it's easy to become impatient with the people growth, as if, oh, well, they're not doing these things that we need them to do. That could be getting ahead of what the actual thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
It's huge.
That's right.
It's huge.
And
Yeah.
it's not always easy to see that when you're so in it, you know.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I think that's part of, as a leader, you've got a vision. Like you think about it constantly, you're praying about it constantly, you're in it all the way.
Sure.
But other people aren't necessarily there, right? So so it takes some time to both communicate and
Yeah.
get buy-in and all that. But at the same time, there are situations where you need to, like I said, push the gas a bit and say, like, not everybody's gonna like this, but it needs to be done. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Thank you for being on our coffee
Well,
convo.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Enjoyed it.
Reverend Dr. Chris Shumate,
Yes. Yeah.
University campus pastor.
Yeah. Minister.
Minister.
See, we could
Campus
get into a
minister.
big ecclesiological discussion there.
We could. Let's do that
Pastors
off
are for
camera.
churches.
Let's bring it
right?
on.
Pastors, yeah. Let's do it. Yeah.